Hello, traveler. Are you able to help me? Brilliant. I have lost my bow in the woods. Can you find it? Thank you so much for finding my bow. As a reward, you can keep it.
When the player presses down on the attack action button, it goes to the sword attach function. It checks if the player is holding a sword. If this is false, it will go and check if the bow cooldown is active. If this is false, it checks that the player is holding a bow. If this is true, it sets the fire power float to 0 and sets the firing bow to true. This will then enable the bow drawback animation. It then runs a loop 5 times with a 0.5 delay. Each time it will set fire power. It does this, but checks with a clamp that the power is not over 2500 and adds 500 to firepower, then cast to GI_playformer and sets firepower to the local variable firepower. When attack action is released, it checks if the bow cooldown is active. This is to stop players from spamming the bow. It then checks that the player is still holding the bow. If this is true, it spawns an actor called arrow. Firepower is set as the initial speed for the arrow. The spawn transform is set to the arrow called shoot dir. It then spawns the bow whoosh sound, then sets firing bow to false and the bow cooldown to true. Then it runs the bow cooldown function and breaks the firepower loop, so the firepower does not keep going up when the player releases the attack button. This bit of code gets the world location of shoot dir and makes it into a vector. It then gets the player controller and converts the mouse location to world space. It then makes this into a vector and then uses the function find look at rotation to get just the rotation of the mouse and then set shoot dir's rotation to the rotation of the mouse. This is run every tick. On event begin play, the code runs a timeline, then gets the start location for the ogre and puts that into the A for the lerp vector. It then gets the start location for the ogre again and adds it to the end location for the ogre and then puts it into the B input for the lerp vector. The timeline's float output is run into the alpha for the lerp vector. The lerp vector is then run into the set actor location. This allows the ogre to gradually walk back and forth. The default land movement mode is set to walking with the target of character movement, and the behavior type is set to ping pong and the target is in tap to movement. On event tick, the code runs a sequence first casting to GI_platformer and setting enemy health to the local variable enemy health. This is for the health bar on the HUD. There is a box collision called left detection that casts to BP_player to check whether the player has overlapped with the ogre's detection area. The boolvar overlapping enemy left is set to true if it is the player that is overlapping the enemy. The second part of the sequence run from event tick is to delay for 2 seconds so the ogre does not spam fireballs that runs into a branch with checks if the bool overlapping enemy left is true. If this is true, it fires a fireball with spawn actor and the spawn transform is set to the location of arrow 2. The code does the same for overlapping right, and if the player is overlapping it sets overlapping enemy right to true. This is run into a branch that is run from the false of the first branch, again spawning a fireball if the bool overlapping enemy right is true, but this time it spawns from arrow 1. If the cast to BP_player is false, it checks if it was an arrow by casting to the blueprint arrow. If it was an arrow, it casts to GI_platformer and gets firepower, then divides it by 50/100 to get the correct amount of damage to be done to the ogre. On the event any damage, it gets the damage done and takes this away from enemy health. This is then set as the new enemy health. If this is less than or equal to 0, it casts to GI_platformer and sets enemy 1 health to 0. It then casts to GI_platformer and sets show enemy health to false and then destroys the actor. In the settings menu, you can enable a speed run timer, you can enable a game mode called half a heart, you can toggle the music, show FPS, toggle subtitles, toggle full screen and set your graphical settings. I am going to toggle on the speed run timer and show FPS. You can see the speed run timer at the top center of the screen and the FPS just under the player's heart. You can limit your FPS to improve performance on low-end systems. You can see now the FPS won't go above 60. You can set your graphical settings manually, or you can use the auto button and it will set the settings that it thinks will be the best for your system.